Good evening, everyone. Before the stories begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. The more you engage, the more these chilling tales will return to your feed. Now, let's step into the dark together. When Mark and I got married, we didn't have the money for a tropical getaway or some flashy resort. What we did have was a friend of his uncle who owned a little cabin in Maine. It sat right on the edge of Coldwater Lake, tucked between pines so thick it looked like the woods had swallowed it whole. Remote, quiet, no neighbors for miles. Perfect honeymoon spot, Mark had said with that goofy grin I fell in love with. Just us, the lake, and a whole week of peace. I thought it sounded romantic. Rustic, sure, but romantic. The drive up took nearly 5 hours from Boston. By the time we turned down the gravel road that led to the cabin, the sun was already slipping low. The cabin looked like something out of a postcard. Log walls, stone chimney, a porch that sagged just enough to creak under your step. The lake shimmered behind it, dark and glassy, stretching into the trees. The caretaker, a wiry man in his 60s named Hank, met us there. He handed Mark the keys, gave us a quick rundown of the propane stove and the generator out back, and then, without much small talk, left in his pickup. Friendly guy, Mark joked, but his smile faltered. Hank hadn't even said congratulations. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old smoke. Cozy enough. A fireplace, a small kitchen, a bedroom with quilted blankets. The kind of place you'd picture in a Christmas card. But there was something about the silence. No birds, no crickets. Just the soft lap of the lake against the shore. That night, we opened a bottle of cheap champagne and toasted to our new life together. We laughed, we kissed, and for a little while it felt like the fairy tale we wanted. Until I woke at 3 a.m. At first, I thought it was just the creak of the old cabin, but then I realized it was rhythmic. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause, coming from the front door. I nudged Mark awake. "Do you hear that?" He groaned, rubbing his eyes, then froze when the sound came again. Scratch, scratch. This time, faster, closer. We tiptoed to the living room. The moonlight poured through the windows, silvering the wood floor. I expected to see raccoons or maybe a branch blown against the door. But the scratches weren't outside. They were carved into the inside of the wood. Long, jagged marks etched deep, as if someone had dragged a knife over and over in the same spot. Some were fresh enough to splinter. Others had been painted over, faint, but still there. Mark pressed his palm to the grooves. His face went pale. These weren't here when we came in. We searched the rest of the cabin, every wall, every door frame, and that's when we saw it wasn't just the front door. The inside of the bedroom door had them too. Deep scratches, almost gouges like someone had tried to claw their way out. Neither of us slept after that. We sat up with the fire burning low, waiting for dawn. The next day, Mark tried to brush it off. It's probably just old damage. Maybe kids messing around. He wanted to believe it. Hell, I wanted to believe it too. But when I looked closer, I noticed something that froze my blood. Next to the bed frame, half hidden beneath the quilt, someone had carved words into the wood. Letters, shaky, but clear. "Don't stay." I didn't say anything to Mark. I just kept it in my chest, heavy as stone, while we forced smiles and made breakfast. That evening, Hank's truck pulled into the drive. Mark waved him over and asked casually about the scratches, about whether the cabin had been broken into before. Hank didn't answer right away. He just stared at the lake, his jaw tight. Then he muttered, "Best to keep the doors locked at night. Things come up from the water sometimes." Mark laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Hank didn't laugh. He tipped his cap, climbed in his truck, and drove away without another word. That night, the scratches started again. Only this time they weren't at the door. They were at the window. The scratching at the window didn't sound like nails on glass. It was deeper, heavier, as though something was pressing metal against it. Mark grabbed the fireplace poker, his knuckles white, and motioned for me to stay back. We inched toward the window. Moonlight spilled across the glass, and for a split second I swore I saw a face staring in. Pale, hollow-eyed, gone the instant I blinked. Mark yanked the curtain shut. "It's just branches," he muttered, but his voice shook. We locked every door, every window, and crawled back into bed fully clothed. I kept my eyes open, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling until exhaustion dragged me under. I woke again to silence. No scratching, no creaking, just dead quiet. I thought maybe I'd imagined everything, until I realized Mark wasn't beside me. The sheets were cold. I stumbled into the living room. The front door was cracked open, letting in a blade of icy air. My stomach dropped. I stepped outside barefoot, calling his name. The lake glistened under the moon, and there, at the edge of the dock, Mark stood frozen, staring at the black water. "Mark?" My voice broke. He didn't turn, he didn't answer. I walked closer, my feet numb against the wood. That's when I saw the scratches gouged into the dock's railing. Fresh, splintered, long trails carved by something dragged from the water onto the boards. "Come back inside," I begged. "Please." Finally, Mark turned his head. His eyes were glazed, unfocused, like he was sleepwalking. His lips moved, barely whispering. "They're waiting for us." Before I could reach him, a hand shot up from the water. It was white, bloated, its fingers unnaturally long. It clamped around Mark's ankle and yanked. He screamed. The sound tore through me as his body crashed into the lake. I dove after him without thinking. The water was freezing black, so dark I couldn't tell which way was up. My hands flailed until they caught cloth, his shirt. I pulled with everything I had, dragging him toward the dock. He kicked and thrashed, coughing, but the hand wouldn't let go. Through the water I saw them, not one, dozens. Faces pale as moonlight, eyes wide and hollow, mouths open in soundless screams. They clung to the underside of the dock, hair drifting like weeds, their nails carving the wood even as they reached for us. I wrenched Mark free, my lungs burning. We clawed up onto the dock, collapsing side by side, coughing lake water. For a moment, neither of us could speak. Then, faintly, I heard it. The dragging sound. Scratches deeper than ever coming up the boards toward us. We ran. Barefoot, soaking, through the cabin, out the back door, down the gravel road until our legs gave out. By dawn, we reached the highway and flagged down a passing trucker. He didn't ask many questions, just drove us straight to town. Later, when police went to check the cabin, they found the place empty. No scratches, no carvings, not even the words I'd seen on the bed frame. Just a perfectly normal cabin on a perfectly quiet lake. They told us we must have panicked, hallucinated, maybe nearly drowned. Stress, exhaustion, cold water. That was their explanation. But sometimes at night Mark wakes up screaming. He says he can still feel the hand on his ankle pulling him down. And me? I can't close my eyes without hearing it. The slow, steady scrape of nails carving wood in the dark. The first morning on the island, I woke to the smell of bacon. A full breakfast tray sat on our porch table. Pancakes stacked high, orange juice sweating in the heat, steam still curling from the eggs. I hadn't heard a knock. My husband hadn't stirred either. I stepped outside barefoot, the wood warm under my skin, and looked around. No footsteps in the sand. No staff slipping away down the dock. Just the tray waiting, perfectly arranged, as if it had appeared out of thin air. At first, I laughed. "Room service with a magic trick," I said. My husband thought it was clever, invisible service that didn't intrude on our honeymoon. But something about it bothered me. The food wasn't just there. It was hot. Someone had been close enough to place it without us hearing a sound. We ate anyway. Hunger overrode my unease. The island itself looked like a postcard. turquoise water, white sand, palm trees that seemed to form walls around the bungalow. But after breakfast, as we sat on the deck, I noticed the silence. No gulls circling overhead, no hum of boats out in the distance, no faraway voices from staff, just the water, endless and constant, and the hiss of wind through the palms. By afternoon, another tray appeared, this time with fish and vegetables. Again, no one knocked. Again, no footprints. That night I woke to a faint whirring sound. Not waves, not wind. A mechanical hum. When I sat up, my stomach dropped. In the corner near the ceiling, a black camera lens stared down at us, a red light blinking softly in the dark. I froze. My husband stirred beside me, grumbling until he followed my gaze. We both stared. The lens tilted, adjusting, centering on the bed. I climbed onto the chair, my hands shaking, and examined it. No wires, no outlet, no switch. Just a device stuck into the wood, humming as it tracked us. My husband pulled it down and hurled it into the lagoon. It sank without a splash. We didn't sleep after that. The next morning, another tray of food waited. Scrambled eggs this time, toast cut into neat triangles. It was still warm. Neither of us touched it. We tried calling the resort. Both of our phones read the same thing. No service, no Wi-Fi either. It didn't matter where we stood. Porch, dock, even at the tree line. Our devices had become useless glass. By late afternoon, my husband spotted something across the lagoon. A figure, standing in the shadows where the palms thickened. I squinted until my eyes watered, but it never moved. Just stood there, dark and still, watching. "Hello?" I shouted, my voice shaking. "Can you hear me?" No answer. We waited for minutes, then hours, but the figure never stepped closer. Finally, the sun dipped, and the shadows swallowed it whole. That night, I woke again to the mechanical whir. Another camera, mounted above the bed. This time I didn't hesitate. I climbed up, yanked it out of the ceiling, and smashed it against the floorboards. The lens cracked, the pieces scattering under my bare feet. We stayed awake until morning. Neither of us trusted the dark anymore. When dawn finally lit the water, I heard the sound. A whisper, almost too soft to notice. Paper sliding under the front door. My chest seized. I crept forward, my husband close behind me. On the floor lay an envelope, cream-colored, edges crisp. I crouched, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. Inside, a single sheet. Neat block letters pressed deep into the paper. "Don't run. The game begins at sunset." We didn't speak for a long time after reading the note. It lay between us on the table like something poisonous. The words burned into my mind. Don't run. The game begins at sunset. I wanted to believe it was some sick prank, maybe from the resort staff. But the way the letters were pressed into the page, perfectly neat, perfectly cold, told me it wasn't a joke. Whoever wrote it wanted us terrified. By late afternoon, my husband suggested boarding up the bungalow, blocking the doors and windows with whatever we could find. We dragged chairs and the dresser against the front door. We shut the curtains tight. We sat in the middle of the room, listening. As the sun dropped, the air itself seemed to change. The silence that had been unsettling before became unbearable, thick, like the whole island was holding its breath. Then we heard it. A horn. Low. Distant. It rose through the palms like some ancient call vibrating through my chest. My husband's face went pale. "That's the signal," he whispered. The game had begun. At first, it was only footsteps, heavy, deliberate, circling the bungalow. Then the faint scrape of something sharp dragging across the wooden stilts beneath us. My heart hammered so loud I thought they would hear it. A shadow passed across the thin curtain, too tall to be my husband, too broad, then another, and another. They were surrounding us. The first smash came from the back window. Glass rained across the floor. A hand reached through, gloved, gripping the frame before yanking back. Another crash followed on the other side. We bolted. The barricades we'd built meant nothing. The front door burst inward, chairs skittering across the floor. A figure stepped inside, tall, faceless behind a mask of dark leather stitched crudely together. In one hand he held a bow. In the other an arrow tipped in gleaming steel. He tilted his head at us like we were animals. We ran through the back, leaping off the porch into the sand, sprinting toward the tree line. Branches whipped against my skin. The forest swallowed us in seconds, but I could hear them, at least 3, maybe more, crashing through the undergrowth behind us, moving with a patience that chilled me. They weren't rushing. They knew the island was theirs. We stumbled through the palms, deeper and deeper until the sand gave way to wet earth. The air grew heavy with the smell of rot. That's when we saw it. A cage. Rusted iron bars bent into a square, shoved between tree roots like it had been waiting for years. Inside lay scraps of clothing, a pair of cracked sunglasses, a shoe half buried in mud. My stomach lurched. These weren't decorations. They belonged to people who had been here before us. The sharp twang of a bowstring split the silence. An arrow slammed into the tree trunk inches from my face, quivering. We bolted again. Night fell fast in the forest. The dark became suffocating, broken only by the sweep of flashlights cutting between trees. Each beam lingered too long, like a spotlight on a stage. Once one of the beams caught my husband's arm, and a voice rang out, deep, cheerful, wrong. Got one. We threw ourselves into the brush, crawling on our stomachs until our chests burned. Bugs bit at our skin, mud soaked our clothes, but we didn't stop. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time lost meaning. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the occasional clap of hands echoing through the forest. Slow, mocking applause. When we finally broke through to the other side of the island, the beach stretched out before us, moonlight silvering the water. The bungalow stood far behind us, dark now, a shadow on stilts. And waiting at the shoreline was another figure. Masked, still. Bow drawn, aimed directly at us. We froze. A horn blared again, this time closer. From behind us, shadows emerged from the trees. The hunters closed in, circling like wolves. We backed into the surf until water lapped at our knees. I thought they'd kill us right there. But instead, the one with the bow lowered it. Another figure stepped forward, taller than the rest. His mask wasn't leather, but bone-white porcelain, smooth except for 2 black eye holes. He raised his hand, and the others stopped. In a voice muffled but clear, he said, "The package is complete." And then, as if on command, they all turned and melted back into the forest. We staggered to the sand, shaking, gasping, unsure if it was over or just another round. By sunrise, a boat appeared offshore. Sleek. White. Waiting. We didn't question it. We climbed aboard, collapsing on the seats as it carried us away. Not a word was spoken during the ride back. When the resort came into view, the same concierge from our first day stood waiting on the dock. She smiled politely, hands folded in front of her. "Congratulations," she said softly. "We hope you enjoyed your honeymoon package." And then she handed me another envelope. Inside, in the same block letters, were 4 words. "See you next year." When we pulled into the gravel driveway, my stomach dropped. The photos online had shown a charming honeymoon rental. White shutters, flower boxes, a little swing under a big oak tree. What stood in front of us now looked wrong. The shutters were faded gray. The flower boxes were empty, dirt spilling onto the siding. The swing was broken, hanging on one chain, creaking in the wind like it was groaning. My husband tried to laugh it off. "It's just wear and tear, probably old pictures." But the way his voice caught at the end told me he didn't believe it either. We carried our bags inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not mildew, not rot. Something sharper, like bleach. a chemical sting in the back of my throat. The living room was dim, curtains drawn even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Mismatched furniture slumped against the walls. The couch sagged like it had been sat on by generations. The walls were lined with framed photos, but every single face had been scratched out. Couples at picnics, families on porches, weddings. All their smiles were ruined by gouges, deep grooves where nails or knives had dug across the glass. "Maybe it's just a weird theme," my husband muttered, setting our bags by the couch. I didn't answer. Upstairs, the bedroom was slightly better. Clean sheets, a dresser, a wide window overlooking the trees. Still, the chemical smell lingered, stronger here, almost metallic. We tried to shake it off. We unpacked, poured wine, pretended the house wasn't giving us chills. But when I went to the bathroom, I found something that made my skin crawl. On the mirror, barely visible unless you leaned close, were smudged words drawn by a fingertip on glass. Faded, like they'd been left after steam from a shower. "Don't sleep here." I stumbled back. My husband tried to scrub it away, but the letters remained faintly etched. That night we tried to convince ourselves it was fine, that it was just some leftover prank from previous guests. We locked the doors, shut the curtains, crawled into bed. But sleep never came easy. The house creaked like it was breathing. The wind outside moaned through the broken swing. Around midnight I woke to a sound, a faint shuffle, a weight on the floorboards. I held my breath. The noise grew louder. Not the house settling. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. I shook my husband awake. His eyes widened, straining in the dark. We listened together. The footsteps stopped just outside the bedroom door. The knob turned. Once, twice, slowly. Testing. We both stared, frozen, as the sound of breathing drifted through the crack under the door. Shallow. Patient. Someone was standing right there. After a long minute, the steps retreated. Down the hall, back down the stairs. We waited. Neither of us dared move. Finally, my husband whispered, "Maybe it was the wind." But even he didn't believe it. At dawn, when we forced ourselves downstairs, the front door was still locked, the window still latched. No signs of forced entry, but on the kitchen table sat a Polaroid photo. Fresh, unfamiliar. It showed us, sleeping in bed. We stared at the Polaroid until the edges curled in my sweaty hands. It was us, tangled in the sheets, mouths slightly open, asleep. The photo had been taken from inside the bedroom. I wanted to leave immediately, but when we tried, the front door wouldn't budge. The lock turned, the handle twisted, but the door felt like it was bolted shut from the outside. Panic set in. My husband tried every window. Each one slid open a few inches but stuck, sealed with thick layers of paint. He even tried breaking the glass, but it was stronger than it looked, reinforced somehow. Every strike bounced back with a dull thud. We weren't just staying in the wrong house. We were trapped inside it. By afternoon, hunger set in. We hadn't eaten since the day before, but when we checked the fridge, it was stocked. Perfectly arranged. Milk, fruit, meat wrapped in paper. I reached for an apple but stopped when I noticed the skin. A small mark carved into it, letters etched with a razor. Smile. I dropped it on the floor. That night we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room, backs pressed together, every light on. The house creaked and moaned, but beneath it, I swore I heard breathing in the walls. A soft laugh from somewhere upstairs. At one point, my husband swore he saw movement in the hallway mirror, a figure behind us. When we turned, nothing was there. Then came the photos. We woke the next morning to dozens of Polaroids scattered across the kitchen table. Some of us sitting on the couch, some of us brushing our teeth, some of us holding each other, whispering in the dark, none of which we remembered anyone being there to capture. But one photo made my stomach lurch. It was of us, standing exactly where we were now, staring at the photos on the table. I dropped it, heart pounding. Someone was in the house at that exact moment, watching us, photographing us. We tore through the rooms, searching, checked closets, under beds, behind furniture. Nothing. The house felt empty, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. That night, the house made the decision for us. We were upstairs when the bedroom door slammed shut, locking from the outside. I rushed to the handle, but it wouldn't turn. My husband kicked until his foot bled, but the wood barely shook. Then, the lights went out. We stood in pitch black, listening as the footsteps began again. Slow, measured, coming up the stairs. I pressed my ear to the door, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, low and deliberate. Smile for the camera. The click of a Polaroid echoed through the hall. The door creaked open by itself. No one stood there. Just the hallway, dark and yawning. We backed away, but flashes lit the darkness. Rapid fire bursts of white. Every time the light burst, I saw a shape, tall, thin, faceless in the glow, standing closer than before. The last flash blinded me, and when my vision returned, the shape was gone. But in my hand, where I swore there had been nothing, was another photo. Fresh. Still warm from development. It showed us dead. My husband on the floor, blood spreading across his chest. Me in the corner, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. The photo shook in my hand. I wanted to drop it, but I couldn't. My fingers felt locked. We screamed, bolted past the door, down the stairs. The front door was wide open now. We didn't stop to question it. We ran into the night, gravel cutting our bare feet as we sprinted down the road, away from that cursed house. By some miracle, we flagged down a passing truck. The driver stared at us, wide-eyed, but didn't ask questions. He drove us into town, dropped us at a gas station where we called the police. When they went back to the house, it was empty. No photos, no food, no Polaroid camera. The listing had disappeared too, like it had never existed. But I know what we saw. I know what held us there. And sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, the room flashes white for just a second. And in the morning, waiting on the nightstand is another Polaroid. Always of me. Always with someone behind me that I can't see. We chose a road trip for our honeymoon because it felt different. Everyone else we knew booked cruises, resorts, or international flights. We wanted something stripped down, personal, unpredictable. No plans, no rules, my spouse said while tossing a map onto the kitchen table. Just us and the road. So that's what we did. The first couple days felt perfect. We drove through wide-open highways with nothing but fields stretching to the horizon. We stopped at gas stations for snacks, argued over playlists, and laughed about how we were officially the married ones now. At night, we pulled into roadside motels, the kind with neon signs flickering half-broken, and fell asleep, tangled up in scratchy sheets. I thought this was what marriage was supposed to feel like. Easy. Carefree. But on the third day, something shifted. We were winding through the mountains when my spouse started telling a story about childhood summers. Swimming at a quarry with friends, sneaking out after dark, almost getting caught by the sheriff. I laughed and said, "That's funny. You told me that happened in Illinois." Their hands tightened on the wheel. A pause. Then too quickly. "Right. Illinois." I misspoke. It wasn't just the correction. It was the way it sounded practiced, like they'd rehearsed it. I let it slide, but a knot twisted in my stomach. That night we stopped at a motel tucked into the trees. It smelled faintly of pine and damp carpet, but we were too tired to care. We showered, ate takeout, crawled into bed. I fell asleep to the hum of the heater. Somewhere in the night I woke to a voice, whispering, At first I thought it was the TV in another room, but when I opened my eyes I saw my spouse sitting in the armchair by the window, phone pressed to their ear. Their face was half-shadowed, their posture rigid. The voice was low, urgent, nothing like the playful tone I knew. I couldn't make out much, just fragments. Almost done. No suspicion yet. Yes, isolated now. My chest went cold, then clear as day. Don't worry, they don't suspect anything. The call ended abruptly. My spouse turned, startled, then smiled too wide. Couldn't sleep, just checking in with my cousin, they said. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it, but inside I was spiraling. The next morning, while my spouse showered, I dug through the glove compartment for napkins. That's when I found it. A folded sheet of paper, edges frayed like it had been opened and closed 100 times. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't directions. It was a list. Arrival. Gain trust. Isolate. Deliver. 4 words, written in neat block letters. No names. No context. Just cold instructions. My vision blurred. I shoved the paper back just as the bathroom door opened. My spouse emerged, towel around their shoulders, humming casually. All through breakfast I stared at the way they sipped coffee, the way they smiled at the waitress, the way they talked about the day's drive. It all looked normal, but now it felt like a performance. By the time we reached the mountain roads that evening, silence had replaced laughter. The trees pressed close, branches clawing at the edges of the car. The map showed we were miles from the nearest town. No gas stations, no diners, just endless forest. At sunset we pulled up to a cabin. It stood alone on a clearing, wood darkened with age, windows reflecting the fading light. My spouse's grin returned. Perfect spot, right? They said, jingling the keys like it was all a surprise they'd been saving. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of smoke and something sharper underneath, like bleach. There was one room, a bed, a fireplace, a small table, a locked door at the back that my spouse waved off as storage. We unpacked, cooked simple food, tried to play cards by firelight, but my mind kept drifting back to that list. Arrival, gain trust, isolate, deliver. When I stepped outside for air, the forest was silent, not even insects. My skin prickled. That's when I saw it, nailed to the porch beam, a small, weathered Polaroid. Of me. Not us, not candid, just me, smiling in my wedding dress, looking off to the side. My stomach lurched. I hadn't seen that photo taken. I brought it inside, demanding an explanation. My spouse froze, then slowly smiled. And in a voice that was no longer theirs, they said, "I told you, you don't suspect anything." The words hit me like a punch. My spouse's smile didn't reach their eyes. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The fire crackled between us, shadows jerking across the cabin walls. Finally, I forced a laugh. "Very funny. You're scaring me." The smile stayed, unblinking. "I told them you were easy," they said softly. So trusting. My mouth went dry. I glanced at the door, at the locked storage room in the back, at the forest outside pressing close. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted. They set the Polaroid gently on the table, like an offering, then stepped closer. "Do you know why you? Why us?" I shook my head. My throat was too tight to speak. They leaned in, their breath warm against my ear. "Because people don't question love. You'll follow me anywhere. You already did." I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the chair. "This isn't funny," I snapped, but my voice cracked. Their smile broke for just a moment. The mask slipped. Beneath it was something cold, flat. "Don't fight it," they whispered. That night stretched into a waking nightmare. They moved through the cabin with a calm I couldn't match, locking doors, checking windows, humming under their breath. I lay in bed, wide-eyed, pretending to sleep. Every time I shifted, I felt their gaze on me. At some point, Exhaustion won. I drifted off, only to jolt awake hours later. I was tied to the chair, rope bit into my wrists and ankles. The fire had burned low, shadows stretching long and jagged across the walls. My spouse sat opposite me, calm, expressionless, holding the Polaroid camera. They raised it. The flash exploded. "Smile," they said. I screamed, struggling against the ropes, but they only clicked the shutter again. Another flash, another photo sliding out, the faint buzz filling the silence. One by one, they lined them up on the table. Me terrified, me sobbing, me thrashing. "This is the part they like," my spouse said almost tenderly. "The fear, the betrayal. It makes the offering stronger." The locked door creaked open then. From the dark storage room I heard it. Shuffling, breathing, something dragging across the floor. Shapes moved inside. Too many. Too large. My skin crawled as the smell hit me. Rot and earth. "They're waiting," my spouse whispered. "They always wait." Figures emerged. Tall, faceless in the firelight, their outlines flickering like they weren't fully there. They gathered around the table, silent, watching. My spouse knelt beside me, stroking my hair gently. "You were perfect. They'll be pleased." Then they raised the camera one last time. The flash seared my eyes. When the spots cleared, I saw the photo. Not me tied to a chair, not me screaming. It was me, standing beside them, smiling, eyes empty. The figures leaned closer, the air vibrating with something like approval. A sound filled the room. Not applause, not cheers. Breathing. Dozens of breaths in unison, like the walls themselves inhaled. I wrenched against the ropes until my skin tore. But when I looked back, the chair was empty. Empty, except for the photographs. Dozens of me, smiling, posed, holding hands with the person I thought I knew. I don't remember how I escaped. The next thing I recall is stumbling onto the road at dawn, a truck slowing to pick me up. The driver kept asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer, because when I looked in the rearview mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The smile staring back at me wasn't mine, and tucked into the pocket of my jacket was another Polaroid. Fresh, me and my spouse. Both of us smiling, both of us holding hands, both of us already theirs. For our honeymoon, we didn't want beaches or luxury hotels. We wanted something different, something adventurous. That's how we ended up at an eco-lodge deep in the Costa Rican rainforest, a place where the website bragged about disconnecting from the world and experiencing nature in its rawest form. The van from the airport dropped us off on a dirt road that wound into the trees. The lodge itself was rustic, just a handful of wooden cabins raised on stilts, hammocks hanging on porches, mosquito nets over the beds. At night, the jungle was alive with sound, frogs croaking, howler monkeys screaming in the distance, insects buzzing like static electricity. The staff smiled a lot, but spoke little English, and there was no phone service. The manager told us cheerfully, "The jungle protects you here. Nothing gets in or out unless it wants to." The first 2 days were magical. We hiked to waterfalls, swam in crystal pools, even spotted a sloth clinging lazily to a tree branch. At night, we'd drink rum on the porch, listening to the wild chorus of the forest. It felt raw and different, like we'd slipped into another world. On the third night, just before bed, my spouse mentioned wanting to try the night walk some of the other guests had done. The staff guided people into the jungle after dark, pointing out tarantulas, snakes, glowing mushrooms, things you'd never see during the day. I was exhausted and said I'd pass, but they looked at me with that mischievous grin I loved. "Come on. It's our honeymoon. One last adventure tonight." We signed up. The guide's name was Mateo. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried a red flashlight, the beam cutting just enough light through the foliage without disturbing animals. There were 6 of us total, 2 other couples besides us. The trail was narrow, the air wet and heavy. I remember holding hands tightly as we followed Mateo deeper into the dark, the jungle closing in on both sides like a living wall. At first it was thrilling. We saw a bright green tree frog clinging to a leaf, its eyes glowing like jewels. We spotted a tarantula crouched in a hole, hairy legs twitching. Mateo spoke softly, pointing things out. Everything felt alive, humming with energy. Then, sometime past midnight, we reached a fork in the trail. Mateo said something in Spanish I didn't understand, then turned left. The group followed. Except, when I looked down, my spouse wasn't holding my hand anymore. I spun around. The flashlight beams bobbed ahead, voices echoing forward. But behind me, nothing. Just darkness. "Wait," I called out, my voice cracking. Where'd they go?" The others stopped, confused. I rushed back down the path, sweeping my own flashlight through the trees. "They were right here, right behind me." We searched for half an hour, shouting their name into the jungle, but the forest swallowed every word. Mateo finally insisted we go back, promising we'd look again in daylight. He said maybe they'd wandered toward the lodge by mistake, but when we got back, the staff shook their heads. My spouse never returned. Our cabin was exactly as we'd left it, except their shoes were still by the bed, their bags still zipped by the door. No sign they'd ever tried to come back. That was the moment the fear hit me like ice in my chest, because I knew, whatever had taken them into the jungle, they hadn't gone willingly. And as I lay awake in the cabin, listening to the howls echoing from the trees, I kept thinking about what the manager had said that first night. The jungle protects you here. Nothing gets in or out unless it wants to. I realized then, the jungle had wanted them. At sunrise, the staff gathered search parties. A few men with machetes hacked through the undergrowth, calling names into the trees. I stumbled behind them, exhausted from a night of no sleep, my chest raw from shouting. The forest was hot and wet, the air alive with insects. My voice cracked until it hurt, but nothing answered. Hours passed. No trail, no footprints, no broken branches, as if my spouse had dissolved into the jungle air. Back at the lodge, the manager pulled me aside. His face was flat, calm, as though this wasn't the first time. "The jungle keeps what it wants," he said. "You must accept." I lost it. I shoved him against the wall, screaming that we had to call the police, the embassy, someone. He just blinked, silent, until two other staff members pulled me off him. One muttered something in Spanish under his breath. I didn't understand, but the look in his eyes chilled me. That night I couldn't stay in the cabin. I sat on the porch, staring into the blackness of the trees. Every sound made my skin crawl. The snap of branches, the screech of monkeys, the wet hiss of insects. Around midnight, I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching in the undergrowth just beyond the line of the clearing. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is that you?" No answer. The steps circled the cabin, stopping now and then, as if whoever, whatever it was watching. Then faintly, I heard my name. Not shouted, whispered. My spouse's voice, exactly as I remembered it. I ran into the clearing, flashlight shaking. The beam cut through trunks and vines, but nothing moved. The voice came again, closer this time, soft and urgent. "Come here." I stumbled forward, branches slapping my face, my heart hammering. I called their name, over and over. The whisper drifted ahead of me, always just out of reach. When I stopped, sweating and gasping, I realized I was far from the cabins. The jungle pressed tight around me, the canopy so thick I couldn't see the stars. And then I noticed something that made my stomach turn cold. The voice had stopped. But the insects had too. The forest was dead silent. And then I heard breathing. Not mine. Deep, slow, almost animal. Right behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking wildly. But the beam hit nothing except trees and vines. My chest clenched. I backed up, and that's when the beam caught something on the ground. Fabric. It was a piece of my spouse's shirt, torn, caught on a root. I dropped to my knees, clutching it, my throat closing. And then, just beyond the beam, I saw movement. A figure. At first I thought it was them. Same height, same build, even the same way their head tilted when they stood still. "Please," I begged. "It's me. Come back." The figure stepped closer. And that's when I saw its face, or rather, the absence of one. Smooth skin, no eyes, no mouth, just blank flesh where features should have been. I froze, the flashlight trembling. The thing cocked its head, then opened its mouth. A mouth that hadn't been there a second ago. And my spouse's voice spilled out. "Come with me. It's safe here." I ran. I don't remember how I found the trail, how I crashed back through the foliage, branches tearing at my arms. I didn't stop until the lodge lights appeared through the trees. The staff were waiting. Their faces told me everything. They weren't surprised. I collapsed in the dirt, clutching the scrap of fabric, sobbing. In the morning, they drove me back to the nearest town. No police were called. No report was filed. The manager handed me my bag, patted my shoulder, and said softly, "The jungle doesn't give back." Back home, people asked what happened. I told them the story, but even as I spoke, details slipped. The sound of their laugh, the exact shade of their eyes, the way they held their coffee cup. It all blurred, as though the jungle was erasing them from me piece by piece. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear it again. My name, whispered in their voice. Not from memory, from the trees outside. When we told people we were spending our honeymoon on a sleeper train, most of them laughed. "Who does that anymore?" they said. But that was exactly why we wanted it. Everyone else was going to resorts or beaches. We wanted something that felt old-fashioned, romantic. A moving hotel that would carry us from Denver through the Rockies, across miles of wilderness, all the way to San Francisco. The train looked like it had been pulled straight out of another time. Brass fixtures, velvet curtains, polished wood paneling. Even the staff wore uniforms with little caps and gloves, smiling as they carried luggage down narrow aisles. It wasn't just transportation. It felt like stepping into another world. Our cabin was tiny but charming. A narrow bed that folded into the wall during the day, a window that framed the mountains like a painting, a little desk with a lamp that hummed softly when lit. My spouse was thrilled, running fingers over the woodwork, saying it felt like we'd stepped into an old film. I teased them about practicing their train wave at the next stop. The first day was perfect. We ate steak and wine in the dining car, sitting by the window as the Rockies swallowed the sky. Other couples were scattered around the room laughing, clinking glasses, swapping stories about honeymoons and anniversaries. We even joined a group in the lounge car later, sipping cocktails while someone played piano in the corner. My spouse loved it, the glamour of it, the feeling that we'd escaped the modern world for something simpler. That night, tucked into the narrow bed, we fell asleep to the rhythm of the tracks. The click-clack was almost hypnotic, rocking us into dreams. When I woke up, the rhythm was gone. The train was still moving, but too smoothly. No bumps, no jolts. Just a steady vibration under the floor, like the hum of an engine in the distance. I reached across the bed. Empty. "Hey!" My voice was groggy, confused. No answer. I checked the tiny bathroom. Nothing. The closet. Nothing. Their shoes were still by the bed, but the space was empty. I told myself they'd gone to the lounge car. Maybe couldn't sleep, maybe wanted tea or a drink. But when I slid the cabin door open, the hallway was wrong. Silent. Normally, you could hear everything on the train. Doors sliding, muffled voices, footsteps overhead. Now there was nothing but that low vibration. The air felt stale, heavy, as if the entire train was holding its breath. I called their name softly, then louder. The sound echoed in the corridor, bouncing back at me, but no door opened. I walked slowly, knocking on cabins. 1, 2, 3. No answer. Not even the faint rustle of sheets inside. Every door was locked tight. By the time I reached the dining car, panic was already bubbling in my chest. The tables were set as if ready for breakfast, silverware aligned, napkins folded, glasses gleaming in the dim light. But no waiters, no passengers, just rows of empty chairs, waiting. I whispered their name again. My voice cracked. The only reply was the faint hum under the floor. I pushed on, through the lounge car, past the bar. Empty. All of it. The piano lid was closed, the glasses stacked neatly on the shelves. Not a sign of anyone. Finally, I reached the engine. The door was locked, but I banged on it until my fists hurt. "Hey, conductor, open up!" No one answered. When I pressed my face to the glass, my stomach turned. The cabin was empty. No engineer, no crew. Just controls moving on their own. Levers shifting, gauges twitching, as if invisible hands were operating them. I stumbled back, breath shaking, and froze when I heard it. A laugh, soft, faint, just behind me in the corridor. I spun, heart hammering. The hallway was empty. The yellow lights flickered once, shadows stretching long. "Hello?" My voice was a whisper now. Nothing. I rushed back toward our cabin, every step echoing too loud, too sharp. When I finally reached it, the door stood open. The bed was perfectly made, sheets tucked crisp. Our bags were gone. The little photograph we'd taken the night before in the lounge, the one we left on the desk, gone too. The only thing left was something lying neatly on the pillow. A single train ticket. I picked it up with trembling hands. My name. Only mine. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at that ticket, but when I finally moved, my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I ran the length of the cabin, searching, tearing through every corner. No bags, no clothes, not even a stray hair or toothbrush. It was as if my spouse had never been there at all. My pulse thundered in my ears. I needed proof. Something. I grabbed my phone and opened the gallery. The sunset photo we took together yesterday on the observation deck. Gone. The little selfie at dinner. Gone. Every single picture had changed, leaving just me, smiling alone at the camera, as if that was how it had always been. I screamed, slamming the phone on the desk. The sound echoed back through the cabin like the walls were hollow, mocking me. I bolted back into the corridor, sprinting down the length of the train. Every car was the same. Tables set, curtains swaying, lights buzzing overhead. But no voices, no footsteps, not a single human being. The silence grew heavier with each car until it pressed against me like a weight on my chest. At some point, I noticed the windows. They weren't showing mountains anymore. They weren't showing anything, just black. Not night sky, not trees, not tunnels. Just endless black, like the train was rushing through an abyss. My stomach knotted. I slammed my fist against the glass, but it didn't even rattle. It felt warm under my hand, almost pulsing like it was alive. When I stumbled into the lounge car, I saw movement. For a moment, relief flooded me. A figure stood by the bar, back turned, hands resting on the counter. My chest nearly broke from hope. "Hey, thank God." They turned. It was my spouse. Same clothes, same hair, same face. But something was off. The smile was too wide, the eyes too still, too glossy, like glass marbles. They lifted a hand, waving me closer. "You came back," they said. Their voice was right, too right. The exact intonation, the same soft warmth. But hearing it made my skin crawl. It sounded rehearsed, like someone mimicking them. I took a step back. "Where were you? What's happening?" They tilted their head, smile never slipping. "Don't you see? This is the honeymoon. This is what forever means." I shook my head violently. You're not them. You're not... Their expression cracked for just a moment. Not angry. Sad. Like I'd broken a rule. Then the lights flickered. When they came back, there were more of them. Dozens. All identical. All wearing my spouse's face, filling the lounge car, crowding the aisles, sitting in chairs, smiling with those glassy eyes. Every single one turned toward me in perfect unison. The hum under the floor deepened, shaking the car. The windows flickered. Flashes of faces pressed against the glass from outside, blurred, distorted, as if people were riding along just beyond the walls. My chest seized. I stumbled backward. The one nearest me leaned in close, whispering. There was only ever room for one ticket. I ran. I don't remember how many cars I tore through, how many doors I slammed behind me. The laughter followed. Dozens of voices in my spouse's cadence, echoing through the train. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Finally, I reached the rear car. The end of the line. The door to the outside platform rattled in the wind. Beyond it, nothing but black rushing past. No tracks, no stars, just the abyss swallowing everything. I gripped the railing, tears burning hot in my eyes. "Where are you?" I shouted into the dark. "Where are you, really?" And for a split second I heard it. Their voice. Not the rehearsed mimic, not the glassy doubles, the real voice. Faint, broken, carried on the hum of the train itself. "Help me." Then silence. The doubles filled the car behind me, their smiles catching the yellow light, dozens of glassy eyes fixed on me. The train shook harder, the hum rising to a roar. I thought about jumping, about throwing myself into the black outside, hoping it would spit me out somewhere real. But my body froze. I couldn't move. The last thing I remember was one of the doubles reaching out, placing a cold hand on my shoulder and whispering, "You'll forget soon." Everyone does. When I woke up, we were pulling into San Francisco. The train was full again. Passengers stretched, laughed, gathered their bags. Staff bustled through the aisles. It was as if nothing had happened. But when I asked about my spouse, people frowned politely. The staff showed me the manifest. My name. Only mine. And in my suitcase, where our clothes should have been, there was just one folded uniform. The conductor's cap. The gloves. As if the train had been dressing me for my new role all along. I don't know how I got off that platform. I don't know how I walked into the city and kept breathing. But sometimes at night, I hear it again. That low hum. The sound of rails that don't exist. And I know the train isn't finished with me. Because every honeymoon it needs another passenger to take. And this time, it made sure there was only one ticket. From the moment we stepped off the seaplane, the island looked like a dream. White sand, turquoise water, palm trees swaying in the breeze. The kind of place travel magazines slap across their covers with headlines about Paradise Found. The staff were waiting on the dock in crisp uniforms, smiling as they draped flower leis around our necks and handed us cocktails garnished with pineapple. "This," my spouse whispered, squeezing my hand, "is perfect." The resort wasn't big, maybe 30 bungalows tucked along the shoreline, each with its own plunge pool and private stretch of beach. No kids, no families, just honeymooners. Everywhere you looked, couples lounged in hammocks, toasted with champagne, kissed in the surf. It was like the whole island was dedicated to love. Our bungalow was beautiful, a thatched roof, white linens, floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to the ocean. At night, the sound of the waves filled the room. On our first evening, we dined by torchlight on the sand, waiters gliding silently between tables while the surf whispered in the dark. Everything was flawless. Too flawless, maybe. The second day, I noticed something strange. At breakfast, I saw a couple we'd chatted with the night before, Mark and Alyssa from Chicago, sitting 2 tables over. But by lunch, they were gone. Their bungalow, which had been lit and decorated that morning, stood dark. When I asked about them, the waiter smiled politely. They checked out early, he said. It seemed odd. Who leaves paradise early? That night, another couple we'd met at the bar, a pair from Boston, didn't show for dinner. By morning, their bungalow was empty too. When I asked the front desk, the clerk gave the same answer, word for word. They checked out early. By the fourth day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Nearly half the bungalows were dark. Entire rows of chairs at the beach sat empty. The pool that had been crowded with laughing couples on our first day was quiet. Only a few people drifting aimlessly in the water. Maybe people just come for short stays, my spouse said, trying to reassure me. But their smile didn't reach their eyes. That night, as we walked back to our bungalow, we passed one of the darkened ones. Its curtains fluttered in the sea breeze, and through the gap I thought I saw movement. A figure standing perfectly still inside, watching. When I blinked, the curtain fell back into place, and the window reflected only our own faces. Sleep didn't come easily. Sometime past midnight, I woke to a sound outside, footsteps crunching softly in the sand. I peeked through the curtains. Several staff members in uniform were walking in a line, carrying something heavy between them. A shape draped in white linens. I wanted to believe it was laundry, supplies, anything normal. But as they passed under the moonlight, the fabric slipped for a second, and I saw a hand fall loose, limp and pale. Before one of the staff tucked it back under the sheet, I pulled away from the window, chest pounding. My spouse stirred beside me. "What is it?" I couldn't answer. In the morning, I tried to ask again at the front desk, pressing the clerk about the disappearing couples. His polite smile never faltered. "Guests come and go," he said softly. "That's the nature of the honeymoon. Not everyone stays as long as others." That afternoon, as we lay on the beach, I counted. Only 6 couples remained. And somehow, deep down, I knew we wouldn't be going home together. By the 5th night, the island felt hollow. The laughter that had filled the air when we arrived was gone. The bar by the pool was empty, the hammocks swaying in the wind with no one in them. Only 3 couples were left now. Us and 2 others. That night I couldn't eat. The dining table stretched along the sand, but most sat vacant, candles burning in front of empty chairs. The staff still moved gracefully, serving food no one touched. Every so often I caught them glancing at us. Not curious. Not friendly. Measuring. When we returned to the bungalow, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the desk lay a folded card with our names written neatly on the front. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in looping handwriting, were 3 words. "Tomorrow is yours." I didn't show it to my spouse. I slipped it into my pocket, forcing a smile I didn't feel. But sleep was impossible. I kept hearing the crunch of sand outside, the faint murmur of voices moving in the dark. Around 3 a.m., I gave in and peeked through the curtains again. The staff were back, carrying another linen-draped shape between them. They moved silently, without strain, like they'd done it many times before. My breath caught when the moonlight hit a pale ankle, bare and still, dangling loose until it was tucked back under the fabric. I couldn't watch anymore. I sank to the floor, pressing my hand over my mouth. My spouse whispered behind me, "What is it?" I shook my head. Nothing, just nothing. But I knew. The other couple from dinner was gone. The next morning the island was quieter than ever. Only us and one other pair remained. I saw them at breakfast, a young couple, sunburned, smiling nervously at each other. They looked as scared as I felt. By midday their bungalow was dark too. Now it was just us. That evening the staff invited us to a farewell celebration. Their voices were calm, their smiles unchanged. "It is tradition," one said. "A gift from the island." My skin prickled. I wanted to refuse, to lock the bungalow door and never open it again. But my spouse, maybe clinging to some desperate hope this was all still normal, insisted, "We can't insult them. Let's just go." So we went. The celebration wasn't on the beach this time. The staff led us inland, down a narrow path lined with torches, into the heart of the island. The trees pressed close, shadows twitching under the firelight. Finally, we reached a clearing. At the center stood a stone platform, smooth and black, as if it had been polished by centuries of hands. Around it, rows of chairs faced inward, every seat filled, but not by the staff, by the other couples. My knees nearly buckled. They were all there, Mark and Alyssa, the pair from Boston, the young couple from breakfast. Every single one of them. Dressed in white, faces blank, eyes glassy and empty like dolls. They sat perfectly still, hands folded in their laps, breathing in unison. My spouse gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. "What the hell?" The manager stepped onto the platform, raising his arms. "Love is devotion," he said in a clear, steady voice. "Love is sacrifice. Love is forever." Two staff members stepped forward, gently taking my spouse by the arms. I lunged, shouting, but three more caught me, holding me back with surprising strength. "No!" I screamed, thrashing. "Let them go! Don't touch them!" My spouse fought too, crying out my name, heels digging into the dirt as they were dragged up onto the platform. The manager turned, smiling warmly, as if presiding over a wedding ceremony. "Every honeymoon must end," he said. "But here, only one must carry the memory. Only one walks away." The glassy-eyed couples in the chairs shifted all at once, leaning forward, their lips parting in unison. A low hum filled the clearing, vibrating in my bones. I begged, screamed, cursed, but the staff held me firm. My spouse was placed on their knees before the platform, hands bound with white rope, their eyes locked on mine, wide with terror. "I love you," they whispered. The manager raised his hand. The crowd of empty-eyed couples exhaled together, a sound like wind through dead trees. The torches bent inward, flames reaching as if drawn by the hum. Something moved in the shadows beyond the clearing. Tall, thin shapes, too many joints, heads cocked unnaturally as they pressed closer. My heart seized when I realized the staff weren't restraining me out of cruelty. They were restraining me as an offering. The manager's voice rang out. "Love lasts forever, but only one of you keeps it." I thrashed harder, my throat raw, but it was useless. The shapes stepped forward, surrounding my spouse, their limbs folding around them like branches. My last sight of them was their face, streaked with tears, lips forming my name. And then they were gone. The shapes withdrew, fading back into the jungle. The crowd of glassy couples sat back, perfectly still again, like nothing had happened. The manager turned to me. "Your honeymoon is complete." When I woke the next morning, I was back in our bungalow, alone. Only my bag by the door, only one ticket for the seaplane. When I tried to protest, to scream, the staff only smiled. "You came here alone," they said. "We're so glad you enjoyed your stay." On the flight back, I checked my phone. The photos were all there, but only of me. Always me. Laughing on the beach, toasting at dinner, smiling by the pool, no trace of them. And yet, when I close my eyes at night, I still feel their hand in mine. Still hear their voice in the wind, whispering my name from somewhere I can never reach. Because the island took them. And I know it has been taking people like them for longer than anyone remembers. And if you ever see that glossy brochure, promising the most romantic place on earth, don't book it. Don't even think about it. Because love does last forever, but only for the one left behind.